Welcome to the Global Issues Daily. Okay, so today we're diving into a fascinating explainer that literally peels back the curtain on our modern global economy. You know, we live in this hyper-connected world where what you see on the surface, well, it's almost never the whole truth. We're going to look at the architecture of these anomalies. We'll uncover why the absolute biggest energy producers on Earth somehow can't use their own resources, and how crippling global sanctions get outmaneuvered right under the noses of international authorities. Let's get into it.
Today's dossier explores an anthology of modern paradoxes, from the hidden realities of global trade and the empty container crisis, to the American oil paradox, smuggling under global sanctions, and a massive geopolitical shell game.
Section 1. Global Trade's Hidden Realities and the Illusion of Normalcy. So right now, as we speak, there are nearly 300,000 commercial ships navigating the oceans. They're carrying around 40 million shipping containers. Think about that for a second. These steel boxes drive a staggering 90% of all global trade. Literally everything from the clothes on your back to the tech you're using right now travels through this massive web. But here's the crazy part. While this network looks perfectly balanced and meticulously managed from the outside, the foundation of this system is actually fundamentally broken. To really grasp the scale of this, you just have to look at the numbers. In 2023 alone, China exported vastly more goods than it imported, which left them with a mind-boggling $823 billion trade surplus. And look, that isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. In the real world, it means an absolute flood of physical, heavy steel boxes pouring out of Asian manufacturing hubs every single day. To put that massive $823 billion figure into perspective, Europe's combined trade surplus for that exact same time was just $41 billion.
So this relentless one-way flow of goods creates a massive bottleneck. Picture these behemoth cargo ships, some literally longer than aircraft carriers, crossing the Pacific completely loaded down with stuff. But what happens when they actually reach the United States? The US is the world's biggest consumer market, right? Meaning it imports way more than it exports. When those massive vessels unload at American ports, they're suddenly faced with a gaping void of American exports. They hit a complete logistical dead end.
Section 2. The Empty Container Crisis and America's Steel Graveyards. Because the American export market just doesn't have enough goods to fill all those boxes back up, only about 40% of the containers leaving US ports are actually full. Which means, yeah, the other 60% are left completely stranded. What this translates to in the real world is vast landscapes of rusting steel just piling up and slowly rotting away in massive junkyards all across the American landscape.
Now, the hidden math behind this waste is honestly staggering. Common sense says, hey, just ship the empty boxes back to where they came from, right? Well, logistics is a game of tight margins. Shipping an empty container back across the Pacific costs roughly $3,000. Plus, an empty box takes up valuable space on a ship that could be holding a loaded money-making container. Meanwhile, a manufacturing plant in China can just build a brand new container from scratch for $2,000. So, brutal economics take over. It's literally cheaper to just abandon them.
Because it makes absolutely zero financial sense to send them back, 2.5 million brand new containers are built every single year just to keep the global supply chain moving. And back in the US and Europe, the bizarre life cycle of those stranded boxes comes to a pretty unceremonious end. They get sold off for cheap storage, maybe repurposed into trendy housing or hipster coffee shops, or they're just melted down in massive furnaces to extract their roughly 2 tons of raw steel. It's a really profound visualization of a completely broken economic loop. So if basic global logistics can trap millions of massive steel containers in permanent limbo, it begs the question, what happens when century-old laws trap a nation's most valuable natural resources? Let's escalate this from shipping physical goods to national infrastructure and dive into a truly baffling reality in the global energy market. Section 3. The American Oil Paradox, the #1 producer, the #2 importer. Right now, the United States is the undisputed, absolute top crude oil producer in the world. It consistently outpaces historical heavyweights like Saudi Arabia and Russia. But, and this is shocking, it simultaneously remains the world's second largest oil importer. It's a massive strategic vulnerability. It's kind of like a farmer who grows endless acres of wheat on his own land, but still has to go beg his neighbors for a loaf of bread. This bizarre reliance on foreign energy rivals isn't just a market accident. It's actively forced by 3 very distinct, very rigid paradoxes: the chemical composition of the oil itself, massive domestic pipeline shortages, and finally, a fiercely protected maritime law from the World War I era. First up, let's talk chemistry. The crude oil extracted from American shale is mostly what's classified as light crude.
But America's multi-billion-dollar refining infrastructure was actually engineered decades ago to process heavy crude, stuff primarily imported from places like Mexico and Venezuela. To go in and re-engineer those highly complex facilities to process domestic light crude would cost an insurmountable $200 billion. So to avoid that astronomical cost, the US simply exports its highly prized light oil to the global market and imports the cheaper heavy stuff its refineries are actually built for.
Second, the internal logistics of the nation are just completely disjointed. Think about Texas. It sits on a literal sea of oil, but there is a severe lack of pipeline infrastructure to actually transport that energy to the highly populated east or west coasts. Because of this massive gap, regions like California function essentially as oil islands. They're physically cut off from the Texan supply, meaning California is forced to import roughly 70% of its crude oil from foreign nations. This means when a conflict erupts overseas, fuel prices for millions of Californians instantly spike, even though there's record-breaking oil production happening just a few states away.
Which brings us to the most crucial point, the Jones Act. This was originally passed way back in 1920 to ensure the US maintained a capable fleet of merchant ships in case of a global war. The law requires all domestic water transport to use ships that are US flagged, US built, and US crewed. Well, over 100 years later, the unintended consequences are staggering. Today, American ships are roughly 3 times more expensive to build than international ones, and domestic crew salaries are drastically higher. This outdated law adds a massive $5 premium per barrel just to ship oil by water from Texas to New York. So it is literally cheaper for US coastal refineries to buy foreign oil shipped from halfway across the globe than to pay the domestic shipping cost for American oil. A law designed strictly to protect American security is now quietly draining its own economy.
Okay, so if American laws actually trap its own oil, how do international laws allow heavily sanctioned nations to buy American planes? Let's pivot to our final case study. We're moving from domestic bottlenecks to the international stage to uncover how global loopholes are actively weaponized. Get ready for a massive, highly coordinated aviation mystery.
Section 4. Smuggling under global sanctions and Iran's ghost fleet. The Islamic Republic of Iran faces some of the strictest international economic sanctions in the world. These are theoretically designed to completely block them from purchasing US or European aircraft, or even replacement parts. Yet the entire international intelligence community was totally stunned when Iran's Mahan Air suddenly flaunted 5 newly acquired Boeing 777s right on their tarmacs between 2024 and 2025. I mean, how does a heavily sanctioned state just acquire a fleet of American jumbo jets?
Well, this cinematic smuggling operation was actually years in the making, and it required jumping through some absurd geographic hoops. First, 5 older but perfectly usable planes were bought from a massive aircraft graveyard in Alice Springs, Australia. The buyer? A seemingly legitimate US front company called Iron Aviation. Once they had them, the planes were flown to China, and then abruptly sold again to a phantom corporation in Madagascar named Udon Aviation. This was a brilliant move because it severed control from the US Federal Aviation Administration. The planes were now legally registered under a totally new national flag. Finally, they were quietly relocated and hidden away in Cambodia, a nation carefully chosen for its famously loose aviation oversight.
Section 5. The Geopolitical Shell Game and Weaponizing the Rules. The grand finale of this operation happened in July 2025, and it reads straight out of a geopolitical thriller. The aircraft filed a bogus, entirely fabricated flight plan from Cambodia to Kenya, claiming they just needed routine maintenance. But once those massive planes were soaring through the night sky over Afghan airspace, which is an area where ground radar and monitoring are incredibly weak, the pilots took dramatic action. They killed their transponders. Going completely dark to all international tracking systems, the planes immediately diverted off course and landed safely in Iranian cities like Shabahar, Zahedan, and Mashhad.
By brilliantly exploiting this incredibly complex, multi-layered web of international shell companies, Iran successfully added 5 Boeing 777s to their sanctioned fleet. Today, Mahan Air boasts a mass of 50 to 60 active aircraft. And because those intermediary shell companies only ever existed on paper, multi-billion-dollar Western intelligence networks were completely defeated. The true buyers remained utterly untraceable until those commercial jets were literally sitting on Iranian tarmac. But honestly, the most fascinating aspect of this whole anomaly is the aftermath. The United States and its Western allies are now largely powerless to stop these stolen planes from flying international commercial routes. Why? Because of the Chicago Convention Law. This international treaty basically mandates that unless nations are actively engaged in a formal declared war, civilian aircraft cannot be legally blocked from utilizing foreign airspace. And get this, if European allies try to bend international law to block Mahan air from their airports, Iran holds massive geopolitical leverage. They can legally retaliate by blocking their own sprawling airspace, which would severely disrupt vital, highly lucrative flight corridors connecting the Middle East to Europe.
So from stranded steel slowly rusting away in American junkyards, to the strategic paradox of importing heavy crude into the world's top oil-producing nation, to the cinematic smuggling of Iranian ghost fleets, a clear, undeniable pattern starts to emerge. The global economy, as it turns out, does not run on common sense. It runs on rigid economic math, historical infrastructural bottlenecks, and incredibly complex legal frameworks that savvy geopolitical players know exactly how to exploit.
I'll leave you with this final thought. If massive, highly coordinated operations, like a fleet of American Boeing 777s vanishing into thin air, or millions of tons of industrial steel rotting in plain sight, are hiding right in front of us, what other incredible geopolitical secrets are we completely missing? Thank you for exploring the architecture of these anomalies with us today. If you want to keep questioning the surface level of international affairs, please subscribe to the Global Issues Daily and like this video to support our journalism. I'll see you on our next explainer.